Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Into the Darkness, the show where we take a dive into the horror genre, be it film, books, games, whatever we decide to turn our attention to. My name is Steve Fitzgerald, and I'm joined today, as always, by my amazing co-host, Sarah Lynham. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, also not too bad. Very grateful for the heat lessening at the moment.
Yes.
As I'm sure that anyone in the UK or this side of the world will be relating to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a few days, hasn't it, of rather hot temperatures. So.
Oh yes. It is nice to feel like I can breathe a little easier and actually sleep. That's the other thing. Oh my gosh. Like the sleeping in this heat is wild. So I'm really glad that last night was not so bad.
Not so bad, and as I say, it looks like a week of respite now. So we hope everyone else is enjoying this sort of journey into the mid-20s rather than the mid-30s at the moment.
Yeah.
So here we are with episode 14 of Into the Darkness, or as it will probably be called on today's episode, Into the Labyrinth, which I think is probably a more appropriate title for today, as we are continuing our journey through the Hellraiser franchise. We've already covered Clive Barker's Hellraiser and the Hellbound Heart as well, the novella it's based on, in our last episode, episode 13. And today we are heading into Hellbound, Hellbaster, Hellbaster. Yeah, it's a very what's it, like Full Moon Entertainment presents Hellbaster. No, don't give them ideas. They've already got the Ginger Dead Man. That's a real thing. Look it up.
Sounds great.
So yes, we are heading to Hellbound Hellraiser II, 1988 sequel to Hellraiser, directed by Tony Randall, written by Peter Atkins, from an original story by Clive Barker. And this one really is taking, what was established in the first one and really, pushing things, I think, going to sort of wilder and bigger and more extreme places than the first film. I first saw it, I think, very soon after the first one. I think I mentioned on the last episode that I got these films on VHS from a car boot sale, and I think I got them both at the same time. So probably watched them within a day of each other, and I really love them both. It watching them back to back or close together, I do think they do feel like a transition from each other. They feel like of the same universe. How did it feel to you, like your sort of expectations before going in and then while you were watching?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like having watched them, quite close together this time, more or less back to back, the first and the second one. Although I had never seen the second one, but I had seen the first one several years ago. I think we worked it out, was something like 10 years ago, which is wild.
Yeah, I think something almost, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the second one is great. It's such a good continuation, isn't it? Like even the very start of it, gives you scenes from the end of the first one, so it really does feel like it is a direct continuation. I love it when films do that, when films in a franchise do that. It makes it so much like this. It's seamless, and it's just one long extended story. And I thought it was great. I don't know what I expected going in. I mean, I've heard from a lot of different people that there are some highs and some lows in the franchise, but I think I consistently heard that the second one is good. So I was like, okay, so I have relatively high expectations because I really enjoyed the first one, and I think it met, if not maybe exceeded my expectations. It was even better than I thought it was going to be. It was really good. I really liked it.
I think it does. I think for the most part it does exceed expectations, really. It's doing very different stuff to the first film. I think we spoke a bit about last time how the first film is this sort of, I think did you use the expression slice of life, about the first film?
Yeah.
And I thought that, and I do, there is this, real sort of like drama going on, between the characters. It's very much about its characters, which is a really lovely, really one of its huge strengths, as well as being, a horror film. And where it goes with this one, I think, is it feels both natural and really different, but I just want to agree completely with the point you just made about when films do make an effort to sort of really feel like they're tied together, and this really does do that. I love it when Halloween 1 and 2 do that, the Phantasm films do that, and lots of others as well. But it's nice to feel like you haven't left a universe. Quite often with the sequel, they'll feel a little, time has passed, maybe they're shot differently. Sometimes that's done to brilliant effect, but here it really, really works. And as you said, it begins with this breakdown, not of the first film actually, but its ending. The moments of the Cenobites being sent back, to what we now know is the labyrinth, or the place that the god Leviathan inhabits. And then we head straight away with a film that almost a scene that almost mirrors the first film, but and then has sort of a twist on it, which is seeing the character we later find out is Elliot Spencer, opening the box and transforming into Pinhead, which I imagine must have been a really cool moment when you realised what was going on.
Yeah, that was awesome. Initially, I was like, "Oh, are we sort of exploring the idea that this, like, the sort of crosshatch and like the pins in the head were maybe they did that a lot. Maybe that wasn't just a one-off thing for the Pinhead character." And then when you realized there was a sort of connection and you could tell that it was Doug Bradley, I was like, oh, okay, this is amazing. We're getting backstory. And I was like, okay, come on, I'm ready for the backstory. I'm ready for like how the Cenobites came to be. And it was really interesting that the idea is that they were all once people that wanted to explore the labyrinth, that wanted to, delve into this world. And I was curious as to where that was going to take us in terms of what that meant for the other Cenobites, if we were going to get backstory for everybody, or if it was going to be maybe more of a focus on Pinhead as a character. But I feel like even though that was where we started, that wasn't necessarily where it went. It just kind of felt like it was touching on the idea of this is the creation, this is how Cenobites come into being. So we didn't necessarily get all of his backstory, and I wonder whether that might come up in future films, or whether that might be something that we maybe that's something that just gets developed and we see more Cenobites come into creation, especially because I guess didn't basically all of them get killed in this one? Spoiler,
yeah,
if you haven't seen it, please go and watch the film. This is going to be filled with spoilers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
At the end. Because I tried to think about that really when I was watching it for this recording, about could I remember before I'd watched the second film where I thought the Cenobites came from. Did I think they were people at some point? And I honestly couldn't remember. I think I watched it such a long time ago now. I couldn't remember whether I thought that or not. But yeah, when you sort of do watch it here, you're like, oh, that's an interesting. I don't think you get that from the Hellbound Heart. I feel like they feel very alien in that,
definitely
in a way. Yeah,
I feel like even watching the first film, they almost have an alien-like quality to them. I think it's also like because when I first watched the film, I hadn't read the novella, so I think in my head, like there's a sort of like the fact that their skin tone is different as well made me think alien as well. Like just sort of the way that they presented seems very like other, and I think there was this kind of the open-mindedness that they come across with makes it feel like they know more than we do, which again in my mind makes me think alien as well. So, and then reading the novella, I think just kind of enhanced that idea, because there was nothing kind of implied about how a Cenobite could come into being. Yeah, so it was really interesting to see that, and also have a new Cenobite be created within this film as well. That was very cool. What a cool way to do that. And I think as soon as I saw the wires coming across the face of the Doctor, I was like, oh, that would make a great Cenobite. And then literally seconds later, that was what was happening. I was like, yes, this is great.
Yeah, that's a particularly sort of gruesome moment as well. Like the bit where you get one final shot as he's lowered down Channard by the device he's put into, and that sucker on his mouth is really going at it, and you're like, oh, that's so disgusting. Yeah, and that is really something in the film that does sort of turn it up to 11 from the first film. Is that if you thought the first film was extreme, this film, I think, is pushes it really far. In fact, so far that my video copy, and I think all copies of the film, both at the cinema as well, but definitely on VHS, were cut by the BBFC until the early 2000s. And the first film had a little bit, maybe a few seconds, but Hellbound really did get, sort of censored in some of its moments. And, I don't think that's ever a cool thing, but when you see the film now, even nowadays, I think it certainly has a few moments that take you aback. I know we spoke last time about the sort of response that you'd had to some of the gore in Hell, or rather just not even just gore, but sort of the more violent moments in Hellraiser. How did you how'd you do with this one? Did it evoke any of those? Did it evoke any of those same feelings or reactions at all?
I wonder whether, maybe I was a little more, mentally and gastronomically prepared for this one.
Yeah.
I didn't get quite as much stomach churning, but I did get, there's a scene very early on where your man, Dr. Channard, brings one of the patients back to his house and puts him on the mattress. That whole sequence of him seeing all these maggots and bugs and whatnot crawling all over himself, and he hands him I think it's a barber's razor blade. Yeah. I was just like, what are you doing? I mean, I know what you're doing, because I'm sure that we've already established that the essence of Julia is still within this mattress, thanks to Kirsty mentioning it. And I was like, oh, because, quick sidebar, Claire Higgins' name is in the intro credits, and I was like, oh, that's a spoiler. I kind of wish that I hadn't seen that, because I was like, oh, I didn't know she was...
actually, as well.
Yeah. And also, sidebar, she is incredible again in this film. She is... Yeah, I think I'm a little bit obsessed with her. I think she's amazing. But anyway, so that sequence with that the patient from Dr. Channard's establishment was really, really unsettling. That whole,
it is.
Slicing himself and constantly and over and over and over, and Dr. Channard clearly just doing it because he's got something to gain. He doesn't seem to give a shit about what he's putting this guy through. And then what an amazing kind of section where Julia comes forward from within the mattress and just grabs him, and even just him trying to crawl away and her crawling after him. It's all kind of these weird, jagged movements, which are just, the whole thing is that being kind of our first encounter with the incredible special effects that we see in this film. It's so good, and that was probably the moment where I was like, oh, okay, strap in,
we're in for a ride. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's only one of the incredible sequences in the film, but that one in particular was really, really striking. And I think the other thing to mention again about the credits was that the special effects company were credited at the start of the film as well. And I think that's great, and they absolutely should be. And I think that's really important, because it's so pivotal to the way that the story gets told and the way that it's represented in the film version, as opposed to reading a book. So I thought that was really cool that they were mentioned. Image Imagination, but I don't know if they were also the same team that worked on the first one or not. But yeah,
I'm not sure actually. That's something I probably should have had a little look at before we started.
I can do a very quick little Google. Maybe I'll just have.
Okay. I really like that you said just then about the special effects are really pivotal to the story being told, and what I really love about that is that, you know, there's a perception with, you know, with horror, I think, from the outside, that, you know, excess is just something that is, you know, sort of puerile, or, you know, sort of base, and isn't to be, you know, is done to sort of titillate, you know, sort of the lower senses, you know. But as we know from, you know, from just enjoying film, but particularly films like this, that it's integral to what's going on. You know, the transgression in films like this, the taking things a little bit too far, is essential to how this sort of story gets told. And it wouldn't be right if it held back. You know, it would be a disservice to the story. And so, no, I just wanted to comment on your statement there, because I think you're so right, and it is important that these things are done well, so that we can push far for the story and the characters in it.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't be scared to feel a little queasy or unsettled by the way something looks. Like, I think that should be. I mean, I think for me anyway, the point of watching something that has something to say is that you do feel affected by it. And in you know, either a positive or a negative way. Like, I think either way is good. Being affected by something is always a good thing. But yeah, incidentally, Image Imagination and Bob Keane were involved with the first one as well, and I think they were part of the kind of original design on Pinhead. So yeah, they're great. All hail the special effects team.
And you know, we can only, you know, we know that the budgets weren't massive, and to have come up with, you know, and with this film, you know, this is a real visual feast. You know, they do so much with what we can only is not, you know, massive, you know, Hollywood budgets and stuff. And this, it looks great. You know, some of the sort of matte paintings in this are really extraordinary. You do things that CGI could never, you know. I know we sort of we bring up CGI every now and again. No, I'm not against the use of it at all. Sometimes it's really effective, but you can't be practical, and you're willing to, you know, I think you can invest more when you can see something sort of physically there.
Definitely.
So yeah, no, and that moment, by the way, with the razors and the patient on the mattress, that is the moment that was heavily, you know, had the most heavily censored material, which I'm, you know,
that's not surprising.
And it even in watching it on video when I was younger in an edited form, it still really hits hard. It's a horrible moment, and really lingers on the sort of suffering and whatnot of this patient. So let's talk a little bit about who's back and who's new in Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. So as we say, Claire Higgins with top billing on the cast in the opening credits. Ashley Lawrence is back, of course, as Kirsty Cotton. Doug Bradley is Pinhead, and is Simon Bamford and Nicholas Vince as Chatterer and Butterball Cenobites, and Barbie Wilde. I've not got the cast list up here at the moment, so I hope I'm getting everyone's names correctly. But Barbie Wilde now is taking over as the female Cenobite, so new cast member. And it's just Claire and Ashley, isn't it? And Doug and Simon and Nicholas from the original film. Although something I did notice is that I think, and I haven't checked this, but I was watching when I rewatched, I've never noticed that before. I think the guy at the very end of the film who is sort of grabbed before the contraption comes out of the ground, I think he's one of the delivery drivers from the first film.
Oh, that's great. That's a nice little head nod.
If I'm right. I mean, oh, look at that. Barbie Wilde, Simon Bamford, Nicholas Vince, Doug Bradley. Got everyone right. Good stuff, because they're all amazing. So, yay me.
Nice. Oh, and the guy who plays Frank, because Frank's in it for a moment as well.
Frank. Yes. Frank's both Frank with skin and Frank without skin. So Oliver Smith as a skinless Frank, and Sean Chapman as skin Frank are both back as well. And you know, everyone's back, and they have turned up to, you know, do an amazing job, haven't they?
Absolutely. And I again, this kind of like helps with the continuation and the kind of like story feeling seamless up until this point as well, right? Because if you see all the same faces, I mean, even having a new female Cenobite cast member, like it didn't deter too much for me. I clocked it when I saw her. I was like, oh, that's not the same person, but that's fine. Like, you can tell that that's the same character because of the way that they've literally replicated the open throat section and the piercing that she has. I was like, yeah. Well, we know that that's the same character. I don't know if there was any particular reason why the original actress wasn't able to come back, or maybe she didn't want to, or...
I think the rumour is that she was kind of, and I don't know if this has been confirmed, but I think the rumour is that she was very uncomfortable with doing the first film, or while doing it, didn't particularly like the subject matter and stuff like that, and maybe afterwards just decided that maybe wasn't for her, which is, I mean, Barbie's awesome, but also I think that the performance in the first film is I think the look is in fact, for all of the Cenobites, and this is just a preference thing for myself, but I think I do prefer the look of the Cenobites in the first film. I think that there's something that just, I don't know, just works a little bit more for me in the first movie. I don't know whether that was something you particularly noticed or felt particularly strongly about at all. And I certainly don't feel strongly about it, but
I think I know what you mean. I think some of it is like, for me at least, maybe because we've seen these characters, so we know who they are, so they don't feel like probably don't get the same initial impact when you see them again. You just go, yes, here they are. And I also think it feels like they're lit slightly different. They don't seem as quite like kind of, there's almost just kind of like really aggressive lighting on them in the first one, where you can see every little detail of what they've done, and the beautiful precision of the work of like creating these characters. But I feel like it's a little bit more dingy and dark in the Labyrinth, and so maybe I mean, I'm not saying that there was any sort of skimping on the effects or anything like that, and maybe they were hiding anything, but it feels like the presentation of it feels a little different, and they don't feel as imposing. They almost feel like more part of the world, as opposed to being these kind of omnipotent kind of characters that are like larger than life. They feel a little. Maybe that's intentional, because they are actually just people, right? So maybe it's meant to make them feel less. Maybe less larger than life, less alien. So they've kind of like dimmed down the way that they come across. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe some of it's spending time. There's a few things like I think that like watching it. I think like Doug's teeth, for instance. This is really like, who cares really? But like Doug's teeth, for instance, I think they're much more sort of dirtied up in the first film, and here they look a lot more natural. And it's just a few little things that I think maybe I just appreciate the look a little bit more at first. But look, they look practically the same in this. They look amazing. They're a great unit, and. I can't wait to see them in Hellraiser Revival, because it looks like all of those Cenobites are returning. And we have a release date for Hellraiser Revival now, the video game that is coming out, telling a new story in the Hellraiser universe with involvement from Clive Barker, and that is releasing on October 8th, 2026. So,
oh my
where
gosh,
are we now?
I can't wait.
4 months away. Less than 4 months away now, significantly less now.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
And so, look out for us returning to Hellraiser at the end of October.
I have to do everything in my power to not like spend all my money on the collector's edition, because it looks so good.
Honestly, there is a certain so for people that don't know, because I would definitely, if you got the cash, and you love Hellraiser, there is, I think it's on Boss Team Games website. I might be wrong, but I think it's Boss Team Games website. There is an absolutely astonishingly attractive, as Sarah says, Hellraiser Revival Collector's Edition that includes your choice of either Lament configuration or Genesis configuration from the game, whichever you prefer. Bits and pieces, collectibles, art cards, all the stuff. The only thing that's we didn't have the money at the time it was announced, and the signed versions sold out very, very quickly, which is currently keeping temptation at bay. But closer to the date, who knows? It's gorgeous, isn't it?
It's really good. Yeah. And now I'm only just like beginning to properly delve into the franchise, having loved the first film for a long time, but like. Yeah, now that we're actually getting into the franchise, is this going to be Chucky all over again? Am I going to be like, this is my new favorite franchise?
Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, go check out, the collector's edition of Hellraiser Revival that's available to pre-order now. Loads of videos. They're doing a really good job of advertising it on YouTube. Lots of sort of developer insight and interviews. Looks amazing. I guess without knowing too much, we'll be continuing the universe of the first two films rather than where the films go after that. But yeah, check it out. Looks amazing. We've spoken about it loads. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know what it is already. So yeah, we have our Cenobites and other returning cast scores. We have Claire Higgins, as you've already said, as Julia Cotton, Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty Cotton, and this here is where it gets really interesting, because the first film, as we've said, sort of very tells a really good drama human story along with its interdimensional sadistic Order of the Gash, and here we have what is really in a lot of ways, I think, and it's directly referenced in the film, it's a fairy tale, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a really specific quote about the evil queen and Snow White from Julia. And yeah, it definitely has. I mean, I'm trying to think if it has any other fairy tales off the top of my head. I don't want to pick something obvious like Alice in Wonderland, but like, yeah, like,
yeah, like that is definitely there, isn't it?
Yeah. I was just trying to think if there's anything else, but yeah, there are some really obvious kind of, and sort of like pure evil representation of character, as opposed to there being some slightly more like morally grey. It's like, oh, they've just been influenced by something evil, and then you have your sort of like your classic final girl character who's doing her best to make sure that everything actually happens okay, but she's still, I think is very like herself in the first one, and still is very quite gutsy, and not kind of a classic, I guess, princess, not very classic Snow White, even though that's what Julia calls her.
Yes,
I still think she has. I really like that she actually has agency and a bit of drive to her, as opposed to just sort of
she's
letting
a fiery
things happen.
Personality, isn't she?
Yeah.
Kirsty? I think she's, once she's got her mind set on things, she's very much that, the character from the first film, but now having, been through a lot and not having had, I mean, as you said, this film does, I think it continues almost immediately, doesn't it? From the events of although there's a little bit of retconning where they go back to the house at the start of the film and it's still standing. They decided that it didn't burn down. But yeah, Kirsty is still dealing with, she hasn't had time to process really what's just happened, because it has just happened. And she sees this, the sort of, because there's two sort of main plots, isn't there, running in Hellbound. There's Kirsty's story, which is that she believes that her father Larry is she sees a vision of what she believes is a skinless version of him, with and he's written on the wall, help me, I'm in hell, and she thinks she needs to find a box to get into hell, the labyrinth, the world of the Cenobites, to go and try and rescue him, to help him, which is slightly, although the character is very different in the Hellbound heart, kind of feels like what was going to happen with the Kirsty character in the Hell, because she says there are lots of different puzzles, right, that open different doorways, and maybe she can find the one to get to him in that story.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And I kind of wish I'd really looked at the novella, because I do feel like there's something about the second film here that feels really intrinsically like from the novella. Like I'm just working on memory at this point. It's been a while since I read the book,
Sure.
but I remember saying that I felt like the first film didn't quite, that there was some levels of like suffering and violence that are represented in the novella that I feel like they didn't quite, in my mind, achieve in the first one, but that they definitely have for the second one. And I think that's why I think they're such a great companion. Like, I would almost say like 1 and 2 are the representation of the novella, even though the sort of looking into the labyrinth isn't actually really properly ventured into in the story in the novella. But like, I do feel like them together are like a perfect pairing and good representation of where you would imagine that story would continue to go. So yeah, I'd be quite, maybe I'll read it again before the third film. I don't know if there's any continuation there, but I think it would just be interesting to see how much of what I sensed from the book came through into the second film, in the sort of like the cruelty element of it as well. Like, I feel like Dr. Chenard is just villainously horrible. And I did wonder whether or not, you know how in the first film Kirsty ends up in the hospital and they're all kind of a bit weird with her in the hospital. I was like, was she already in Dr. Chenard's institute? Was that where she ended up in the first film? Because that's where she is at the start of the second. And I just wondered whether there was any sort of connection there as to why maybe they were a bit funny and strange with her in the first film.
Yeah, both of those moments, the sort of the midsection, I guess, of the first film, isn't it, when she's in the hospital, and then here, the sort of behaviour of people is so. In fact, what's interesting is I think Dr. Chenard, when he interacts with Kirsty, that's the most sort of like grounded, normal interactions that she has in those in these establishments, because everyone else is so unusual with her. But I think that's probably a good place to talk about our new cast members, isn't it? Maybe. So we have we have Kenneth Cranham as Dr. Chenard there, and we have, because I want to make sure I get everyone correct. So we have Dr. Kenneth Cranham, Dr. Chenard. We have Kyle, haven't we? William Hope as Kyle, the sort of the other doctor there, and of course Imogen Borman as Tiffany, who are all our sort of new characters here, and they're great, for the most part, really great. They meld really well with the characters we already have, particularly as you've already said. You sort of Dr. Chenard becomes this real sort of villain alongside Julia, who, as we've said, goes from, she's not just the wicked, as she says, I'm not just the wicked stepmother anymore, I'm the evil queen. And that is really what has happened here. We've got a character who has become almost, I guess the knowledge and the power that has been given to her and is given to Chenard later in the film have turned them into more of an archetype of a villain than they were earlier in the story or in the previous film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think the setup for Chenard is, I think it's really interesting, this kind of idea of someone who's so obsessed with the way that the brain works and the way that people think and the psychological elements of human beings, then has an institute where he's taking care of people who need some assistance, whereas actually he's doing the reverse of that, and he's taking advantage of these people. And it looks like the whole point of him having these people here is because maybe they have a way of accessing something that he can't, and using them in order to access the labyrinth. And our poor you already said her name. I've already forgot. Tiffany.
Tiffany, yeah.
Being utilized to do the puzzle work is just as horrific. Like, I think the whole point of the first one is whoever opens the box has to be the one who goes, who gets taken, and who. But then Pinhead says this amazing quote, which is, "It is not hands that summon us; it is desire." And I'm like, great. My God, there are so many great quotes in this, but there are that in particular, I was like, good, because Tiffany doesn't deserve to be tortured.
Exactly.
She's done nothing wrong. She's just done the puzzle on behalf of someone else. I'm glad that I don't know. It's nice to know that the Cenobites have a sense of morals, and they have a code that they work to.
We spoke a bit about that in the first film, which is that they're not just tied to, well, if you open it, this that's the rule, but there's workarounds here, I guess, is what's going on. And exactly when Tiffany, who is a patient that is at Channard's Institute, who is not communicating with people but solves puzzles, and they think that this is a way of her dealing with what's going on in her mind, putting things back together. And we have Dr. Carl, who helps Kirsty escape when he doesn't witness, but he hears, I guess. He gets the gist of what's going on with Julia's rebirth at Channard's home. And that's really the second, our we have Kirsty's mission to save or help Larry in any way she can. And then the second story of, what's going on in Hellbound is predominantly to do with, the Channard and, wanting to explore the labyrinth and using Tiffany as a I guess like a key really to unlock the journey there. And I tell you what, I always, because I think the visions of the labyrinth are so ingrained in my head. Whenever I watch this film, I'm always taken aback by how long it takes, and not in a bad way, but how long it takes to get to, to get into the world of Leviathan and the Cenobites. Because it takes about over half the film before we see them and then head in, and you think, oh, that's. That in its own way is so good as well, because it's working with, even though it's a bigger film and telling a more, complex, some might say, in some ways not quite as cohesive a plot line, it does still take its time to let us get to know everyone, to understand these characters, and before we go into, the really nightmarish imagery of the labyrinth.
Yeah, because I think fundamentally, certainly for this and the first film, it is about the people and the way that they interact with what is on offer in the labyrinth, or what is on offer, from the Cenobites. Like, it's the way we get to know these people so that we know how they will react, or potentially not react, or subvert things when they actually get exposed to them. So I think that, I think it's really cool that, it's not, I wouldn't call the second one a slice of life type situation, but it does still feel like it does still feel like it's heavily about the characters and the human beings, and and how, I think even before getting into the labyrinth, even before getting into the world of Leviathan, we know that Channard is a super mega baddie, and I think that I didn't see that he was going to become a Cenobite, but it seems like natural progression, considering he basically is already doing a form of torture to the people that he's got in his institute. So yeah, it seems like natural progression to me, really. But yeah, I don't know if he necessarily saw himself as going down that route. Maybe that was his plan all along. Maybe he did want that.
Well, I don't think he, because with anything like this, it happens to Frank in the first film, this whole idea of, you think you want this, but the version of what these beings are offering you is so, their concept of pleasure stroke pain, the way they're intermingled is so alien to us as people with normal nerve endings, and that you think you want this, but really we're not built to cope with it, what they do to us. But with Channard, when he is first changed and he is given to Leviathan to be turned into a Cenobite, the first line he has, which I think, as you said, loads of great lines in this film, and he says, "To think I hesitated," and I just love it. That for him, the uncertainty he had beforehand was unfounded. For him, this is, I don't know what that says about him, but we already know how awful a character he is, but that this is the right, and I guess maybe that's why what happens towards the end, the scene with him and the Cenobites, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit, because I think that there's lots of thoughts and feelings about that moment. But I guess that's what gives him an edge, is he has just lost his humanity when they're... I'm talking about it now, aren't I? But I've got to finish my sentence. What he is... I've started, so I'll finish. He is just losing his humanity when, if he had whatever little he had of that in the first place, when they're just regaining theirs. And that's the only way I can sort of justify the moment between them all at the end, really. But we spend our time on, in the earthly realm, and Julia is reborn from the mattress, and again, really sort of hideous scene there when they when you see the victims of her and Channard, in that room. We see it quite a few times, actually, a shot of just a sort of a pan of that room of these women that are in, like the men in the first film, in various states of decay. But there's something really, I don't know, there's a certain... I think those moments in the first film are really awful, and they're, that these guys who get, killed in this way. But here there's something so... I guess maybe because of the way they're chained to the ceiling, but there's just something really bleak about the tapestry that room paid. Did that feel the same to you here? Yeah,
definitely. I think there's sort of this sort of brutality and this weird sort of trophy of war kind of vibe going on, where like in the first film all the bodies were disposed of, and I know that some of that was so that Larry wouldn't find out, but equally, like, I feel like Julia has stepped up a notch here, and she does not really care. She'll just do whatever it takes to become fully fleshed out again in the human world. It was really interesting. I was sort of going, I wonder how many people it's going to take for her to fully form, because Frank never got that far. And I wondered, based on the first film, if it was like impossible to fully reinstate yourself, because I know that he ends up physically wearing Larry's skin, as opposed to Julia managing to absorb, through the back of people's skulls, enough of their essence to fully form, although it doesn't seem to last very long. It seems these semi-permanent things... as opposed to,
You wonder, like you say, I wonder whether there's, I can't believe that once you're reformed, no matter how complete that might be, that's the end of it. I feel that there must be a continual sort of decay in my head. You can't stay. You're constantly being sort of pulled back. Once you've made that pact with this version of hell, the labyrinth, with Leviathan, with the Cenobites. That you are claimed by them. And as you say, even I think it never seems to be particularly. It's not successful in a lot of ways, is it? They always get torn, ripped apart. Mind you, that's just the way of the movies, isn't it? I guess. All flesh.
Do you know what I wonder? Do you know what I wonder though? I wonder why Julia, considering the atrocities that she's done, the number of people she's killed, and not just while she was alive, before she'd even seen the Cenobites, but after she's been in the labyrinth, she's come back through the mattress and is now, manipulating Dr. Channard in order to, become fully formed again. Why does she never end up as a Cenobite? Like, she's done a lot of bad stuff, whereas Dr. Channard almost not as soon as he gets in there, but quite soon after getting into the world of the Cenobites, into the labyrinth, he becomes a Cenobite. I'm curious as to what are the criteria? What boxes do you have to check in order to become a Cenobite? Because also Frank doesn't become one. So I'm just trying to figure out, is it born of a desire to escape, because Dr. Channard seems to fully embrace it, whereas I guess maybe if the option was presented to someone like Julia, she seemed more wanting to get back out into the real world and kind of reclaim herself in that way. So I don't know, but she does seem to be. She also says that she's an agent of Leviathan. It seems quite happy to be representing them. So I guess I'm just not really. I'm curious as to
I'm right there with you. Don't worry. I think that there is I think that there's a certain. There are a few things in the the second half of the film. I think that if you were to, I think if you were to be really critical about them, you know, really, or critique, not really critical, to really sort of critique them and go, what, you know, what is the, what does all this mean? That there would be maybe a little bit of sort of confusion there. There's a couple of moments that I'll bring up when we get to hell. But I'm wondering whether that's but you know, it's not hands that call us, it's desire. You know, as you say, you know, that why is it that there? I guess there has to be the victims, because that's kind of the deal, isn't it? You know, that once you open the box, you suffer, you are treated to the Cenobites, you know, particular brand of pleasure and pain. And I wonder, because, you know, it isn't explained, because I think for two reasons. The first one is that, you know, you have a set amount of time to tell your movie, but also because they want it to be a little bit vague and unknowable. I can only imagine that that it's up to Leviathan, that sometimes when someone comes into this realm, sometimes it sees something in them, you know, that reservation that is made for most people to be under the treatment of the Cenobites is waived in some way. But as you say, if that's the case, why is Julia not a Cenobite? Or, you know, she doesn't seem that that's her job. And I do think that there is where maybe we are just in that fairy tale realm of a sort of dreamlike experience, because I don't know is the answer, other than Leviathan is a god. Maybe it can just kind of do what it wants, and what it wanted was not, you know, I guess Cenobites can't just come and go as they please. They are tied to the lament configuration, and Julia is tied to that mattress in the same way that Frank was tied to that room. So Julia was the you know, the safer bet, I guess, to get back and to bring him there. So because it must have seen something in him before he comes to the labyrinth, because, you know, she says it sent me out for souls, and I you know, so now, you know, I'm giving you to it. So something like that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe there's like a level of like kind of, I mean, Dr. Chenard is relatively accepting of the fate, whereas I feel like Julia still feels quite, even though she says that she's an agent for Leviathan, does still seem quite self-serving. So I think maybe there's like a, she's not able to separate her kind of, you know, her mortal self from what she's become. So maybe she cannot fully become a Cenobite. And that also makes me want to know more about Pinhead, because at the start of the film we see him and he's obviously in some sort of military, maybe the army or something like that. And, you know, depending on your thoughts and feelings about that sort of thing, I think, you know, people, you know, do commit a lot of killing if you're part of an army. I also am not 100% sure what the sort of timeline is of that, and I don't know how long he's been a Cenobite, but maybe there was a level of accepting that, you know, maybe whatever atrocities he'd done at war, during the war, or whatever he was doing, maybe he was willing to accept, yes, I do, I am a representation of suffering, and then became a Cenobite. I don't know whether or not we learn more about that in subsequent films, but I'd be really curious to see more about his backstory and how that came to be, and whether there was any like Julia-esque like no, I don't want to be your Pinhead, I'm not ready for that yet, or
don't give me that moniker, please. Can I just be lead Cenobite, please? Just lead Cenobite. There's nothing wrong with lead Cenobite. I mean, I think that maybe what ties the characters that we've really seen go into the labyrinth of their own choice, which is Frank and Chenard and Elliot Spencer, who's Pinhead, is that they're all seeking experience or have had experience. You know, they've seen a lot of the world. And I think that's what, there must come a, you know, there's this implication that once you've seen a lot, done a lot, experienced a lot, when you are calling out for more, that if you are looking in the right places, if you're looking in sort of the dark corners of the world, you know, for these things, maybe they're looking for other items, you know, as well. You know, there's certainly a vast, you know, the horror genre has a vast sort of history of, you know, items, cursed items, the King in Yellow, the Necronomicon in Evil Dead, you know, that can open passages or open doorways to things. And this is, you know, eventually you'll hear about, in this universe, the lament configuration and what it can offer you. Or indeed, as we notice in this film, that the fact that there is more than one way into this. You know, there's more, you know, more than one configuration. It's just you know, it's just one journey in. I have to, on that note, I did have a little funny thought, which was when Kyle first breaks into Channard's house and he finds the book, and it's all about, like, you know, these sort of weird things that have happened or not, like, and he's really like, oh my, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of things in that room to which you would go, this is weird, right? But then when he's going through the newspaper clippings and just the drawings and stuff, and he's like, this is so, oh my goodness, we are, you know, I wonder what he'd think of, like, modern day search engines, you know, like, just, you know, looking at someone's search history, you know, why is someone looking up this, you know, so I did think, you know, bless him.
I was about to respond to that with, like, oh yeah, let me just check my search. Or maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, at least don't say it out loud. Yeah. So, but yeah, you think maybe it's best that he meets his end with Julia, because I don't think he'd have coped with, you know, what the future had to hold for him. Poor old Kyle.
No, poor guy can't stand looking in a book. He's got no chance in the labyrinth. No.
What can you do? He's
Whereas
also
Kirsty,
sort of a character.
Kirsty is so resilient, like, by comparison, like, so resilient.
Yeah, 100%, and he is another. You know, it's like Steve in the first film. You know, he's this sort of, like, this male character. No, I think they both give vote, because I felt a bit mean actually after doing the Hellraiser, because I think, you know, I just sort of go on about the Steve character, and I don't think it's anything to do with the performance or the anything like that. I think it's just a case of him and really Kyle sort of. Kyle does exist as a you know, he's there for plot. You know, he is sort of needed to get around and whatnot, but he unfortunately, poor old Kyle, sort of suffers a similar fate to Steve, which is that they sort of blend into the background of the story, and I'm not even, you know, I'm not even really against it, because I think, yeah, more room for Kirsty to be cool, right? And for, you know, eventually, you know, Tiffany, who we haven't had a chance to speak about too much so far, but, you know, to become sort of more integral to the plot. But he does feel a little like this sort of character who's there to exist, to do a couple of things and then die so we can all get on with it. So, you know, nice performance, but we haven't spoken too much about him, and maybe that's just because there isn't a huge amount to talk about. But I promise I'll try and not be mean about these sort of little side characters, because bless them, they do give nice performances.
Yeah, and you know, they're just a sort of necessary. They're a plot device at that point, right? So it's how we that's how Kirsty gets out. It's how Kirsty finds out that Dr. Channard is you know, involved in trying to get into the labyrinth. I think he is purely a plot device at this point, which is fine. And I agree. We should be making a pathway for Kirsty in order for her to be more badass. Definitely. Yeah,
absolutely. Kyle does lose some points. You know, he's got some things over Steve, but he does lose some points by not having quite as snazzy a shirt as Steve has in the first film. I think that there is there's a wardrobe decision there that really could have made a statement, and it wasn't done. So we can only mourn the thing. You can't mourn things that didn't, you know, that weren't there. So what can we say?
That's our feedback, though. That's akin to us being like, oh, that's soup in the Chucky film. We're like, oh, that was really like, why aren't they putting any parmesan on top of that like weird like watery tomato water thing that they served up?
Do you know what it looked like? Oh, here we go. Let's go back to Curse of Chucky. It just looked like someone had opened up a jar of passata and put it in. Anyway, we you know the trauma. Like, do you know, leading up to that episode, I had to keep that inside for years.
Look, we have an outlet now. Finally,
like waiting.
Like
just knowing one day I'd be, on a camera talking about Curse of Chucky, finally able to really let loose about the fact that the vegetarian, what are they, chili, isn't it? A vegetarian chili just looks like someone opened up a carton of passata and said that will do us. Anyway, there is no passata in Hellbound, nor is there a multicolored shirt to distract us. So without further ado, let's move into the labyrinth and talk about the pleasures and the pain of Leviathan's lair or realm. How did this feel? Sort of suddenly, almost an hour into the film, we go, oh, we are off. We go, we're heading for it.
It was very cool to see what's inside this world, because I feel like we don't really get much of it. We sort of get glimpses of it in the first one. So it was really interesting to sort of get a little bit more of what it's like to move about inside Leviathan's world. And also to kind of, build on where the Cenobites live and the concept of Leviathan, because that doesn't get brought up in the first film from memory.
No.
So
we have the engineer, don't we, in the first film, but not.
That's right.
To do
and
with
it's sort
of gods or anything. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think it felt implied that the engineer was another Cenobite, but I could be wrong. But that was the way that I read it. It sounded like, there's normally 5 of us, but the 5th guy, he's too busy for this. Like, he doesn't come to the lower level stuff. It's got to get really good before the engineer actually turns up. But yeah, it felt like he was just another Cenobite. It felt like there were no mentions of anything higher, nothing specific anyway. I mean, I figured there was something higher because I despite Pinhead being the lead Cenobite, it didn't feel like that was as far as it went. It felt like there was definitely something else looming above that, but we didn't learn who that was, and obviously we have this sort of demonic character at the very end of the first one who takes the lament configuration away at the very end. There was also that, so I was like, okay, there's definitely something more going on, and also I know that there are several more films, so I know that there's more going on. But yeah, it was very cool to get more of the story, more of the backstory and the development of what's happening behind all of this. It was interesting that we sort of have like the actual box itself kind of has like labyrinthian patterns on it as well, so it all felt connected to that, which was very cool. And there being sort of sections within this labyrinth of where things happen. So you got like Frank's area, which is his hell, which is just like women writhing about and he can't do anything about it. Which, I mean, seems like a pretty good hell for him. Pretty good representation of hell for him. I'm casting my mind back into all the bits of it. But yeah, I really like how the puzzle box almost seems to be a parallel for the actual world that they're in this kind of way. It twists and turns, and in the same way that a labyrinth twists and turns and has sections in it, and parts of it open and close, presumably as you're walking through. And yeah, it's a cool concept, but definitely not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but I don't think it was that.
I mean, I really like the world of this film, and I think there's some really sort of amazing sort of imagery in it. I know it's not a very good doll, but you know the sort of baby that's sewn its lips up that you see at one point. I mean, it doesn't look particularly. Like, probably with good reason, actually, doesn't look really realistic, but it's always an image that's always sort of made me shudder when I used to see it, when I used to watch it. And as you say, these little compartmentalized personal hells, I think it's all really cool in the film, this stuff, and when I watch it, the only thing I do find a little bit, I don't know, frustrating for what is happening here, and I guess what comes later, is it's starting to lean into this hell as sort of doing what the sort of, the modern day religion's hell is, which is sort of punishment for what the things you've done. Sort of the Christian idea of hell, which is that you go and you're punished in eternal suffering and all this stuff. And I really love the scene with Frank here. I think it's really cool. But when I really think about it, I go, but that's not what he's been brought to this world to experience. He's here to meet the sufferings and the pleasures and pains of the Cenobites, not to be given an ironic, it reminds like in the Simpsons, when Homer goes to hell in the Treehouse of Horror, you like donuts, eh? And have all the donuts in the world, and here it's sort of like, you like sex, eh? We'll have none of the sex in the world. And as much as I think it does work within the film, when I think about it, it's maybe not what I really want from the world of Hellraiser, apart from I did a little bit of a deep dive into this a little while ago about why instead of being torn apart and tormented by the Cenobites in their special way all of his existence in the labyrinth, is Frank stuck in a room where he can't touch women under cloths. It doesn't feel extreme enough. And someone said that maybe it was a punishment for escaping. And I think someone online said, they felt that maybe it was, maybe a short-term punishment for his escape before he delves into the Cenobites again. And I sort of thought, that's a nice way of explaining it away, maybe. But it's a trap. I think that this, and in more of a way that some of the later films start to sort of feel that hell is the hell that we're all a bit more accustomed to, and the Cenobites exist there. And to me, that's never really been what this world is about. This is a very, and even, Pinhead says it, about Larry. He's in his own hell child and quite unreachable, so that there's other places you can go. This is just one of them. And Frank says to Kirsty at one point, something like, what are you talking about, Kirsty? When you're dead, you're fucking dead. So that maybe there isn't an afterlife, and this is just what happens when you're taken by the box. So this is my very long-winded way of just going, I'm not sure what they're getting at, but maybe it, under scrutiny, it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with you that the way that what you would expect to experience in this world, represented in the novella and implied in the first film, is very much, it will be our particular mix of the lines between pain and pleasure. It feels like, I never really thought it would sort of be a heaven versus hell kind of scenario, like despite the name Hellraiser, it feels like that's actually nothing to do with it. So it feels very strange that this was the way that it was represented. But it does feel like punishment as opposed to what he got in for. But I can see what that person was meaning, that person who said online that it was, a punishment for trying to get away. There's also an element of me wondering whether or not if it is actually him in that moment, because if it's been said that her dad is in his own version of hell, and she's probably never going to see him again, and when you're dead gets said as well. Like, maybe he's not actually there. Maybe this is part of something to torment Kirsty. Maybe it's something built up in order to, because she hasn't accepted anything from. In fact, she keeps managing to dodge and dive and not, and read the T's and C's and not get fooled by the Cenobites. Right? So maybe this is their way of trying to be like, maybe we can mess with her some way. We can't, we We want to know her flesh, but we can't until we actually get our hooks in, literally. So maybe it's a creation by Leviathan or by the Cenobites in order to try and I don't know, do something to Kirsty.
I like that an awful lot because that also in the novella, in the first couple of pages before Frank, the end of the first chapter is after Frank has these visions and this experience of enormous sensation and senses and overwhelming him, and then it all stops, and the Cenobite that's on the throne of skulls, it says, "So now we can begin." And I like your interpretation of that, because I think that really ties in with that idea from the book that maybe this is like the starter before the main course, that this is maybe this isn't Frank, and this is just her being reminded of everything that's happened to her before they can really get to work. And I think that would make it tie in really nicely with the novella, and do a little bit of work to maybe allow the film to not just be in hell we get punished for bad stuff that we did, because that's not, that I don't think you at any point sort of look at the Cenobites and go, oh, these are just beings from, our, contemporary religions. They're not, are they? They feel like something alien to that. So that's cool.
And also, I think that, like, the Christian representation of hell being a place of torture and somewhere horrible and a punishment doesn't feel like it aligns with what my understanding is what the film is trying to say, especially because we've got an entity called Leviathan, and I'm like, whilst that is mentioned in Christianity and is sort of akin to the devil, like it's also in other scriptures, and I think it's also it's bigger than that. It's more it's less cut and dry, and I think it would just be really narrow to think of it as just they're all gone to hell, so they're all going to get punished. And even the whole concept is what they're seeking in this place is actually a fine line between pleasure and pain, which actually I think in my mind aligns with what I would expect something like I feel like hell doesn't feel like the right word anymore.
No, exactly. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's it.
It
is a hell, I guess, for one of, but it's not sort of the hell with that that Dante was talking about, for instance. It's not that, and when it starts to be like that is when I go, oh, I'm not sure whether this is, the Scarlet Gospels, which is the book that was released that sort of is a sequel to these two films, which I spoke about how much I love Clive Barker, but it's one of his later works, and I don't think it's wholly successful at all, and I do think that some of that is due to the hell in it doesn't feel like the place that we're being told about in these, particularly in the first film. And as you say, I think that it, when it starts to, so probably a good place actually. You mentioned, Leviathan there and sort of the name, and as you said, in scripture, it's seen as sort of a sea serpent, isn't it? As a massive, creature. I think in there's some sort of Gnostic imagery as well of it, sort of, it's the mouth and the tail image of infinity and stuff. I think is attributed to it sometimes, but it's normally seen as a vast sea serpent, and as you say, can be used like a lot of creatures, demons, as a a stand-in for the devil or Satan or whatever you want to call him. And here, and this is a thing that I think really works about the film is Leviathan here is like a cosmic horror, isn't it? It's this great, completely unknowable entity in the sky that has no face, nothing about it that resembles what we would consider a living creature if it is indeed that, and it has its own rules and ideas and whatnot. And I think that's something really successful here, because it's so alien and other and exists as a, just this vast thing beyond our knowledge. You don't have to make any strong decisions about what it wants and what it's doing, because it's scarier that way, and we can't possibly understand something that looks like that but is a thing. What did you think of the sort of when you see it, what did you think of Leviathan in this?
I really liked that it was almost this strangely neutral, because it's just a shape in the sky. And I did wonder whether or not that is a sense of, I don't think human beings could possibly comprehend what I truly look like, so I will give you a very simple thing to focus on so that you understand where the essence of me is. There was also I wonder whether Control, the video game, was inspired by this kind of idea of a sort of omnipotent something, which, I mean, we have to represent it in something quite clean and quite but still kind of angular, and it feels like the entity of the board, I think it is, in Control, are sort of this faceless kind of existence, and that's how I would imagine them, is just sort of a giant stretched out diamond in the middle of a room somewhere as well. So, and this kind of, I think also seeing the labyrinth in its entirety with the big figure at the end of it also kind of made me think of Control, because you have all these sort of weird sort of modular kind of areas that you move through. And I mean, well, we already know that the team at Remedy are heavily influenced by things like Twin Peaks and David Lynch. So I wouldn't be surprised if the sort of classic horror of Hellraiser and other things like it were an inspiration for something like Control as well.
Do you know what? I hadn't thought about Control at all. I guess because I saw this such a long time before playing it, so they're but you saying it then, that's a great link. I love that, because it does, there's a clear similarity between the board and the world of the tutorials and the board, in Control. So I think it must be. And as you say, you speaking about it, this is, just the only way we can see it. It doesn't look like this. This is just the way we see it. You've seen It's Part 1 and 2, haven't you? The Stephen King stories. Yeah. Well, they don't quite go into the same. It's not quite as cosmic or as meta as the novel. The novel gets really out there into the cosmic horror at the end. But I don't know if they use this line in the more modern films, but in the mini series that was made in the 90s, which I just love, and in the book, I think it says to the kids, you think you can see me, you can't see me, you can only see what your little minds will allow you to see, and that's, so that the closest they see in that is the deadlights, not the clown or the werewolf or even the giant spider version of it, the entity really looks like, or the closest we can see is the deadlights, but when we look at them, we go insane. We can't look at them without it's eradicating, in a Lovecraftian way, just destroying our concept of reality. And maybe that, as you say, maybe for Leviathan, we have to see it as a shape in the sky, because to see it would be to go mad. So that's kind of cool. And I love that sort of, maybe the board in Control is influenced by Leviathan in Hellraiser. I love that. And I can totally see it. Awesome. So let's talk about what let's talk about what happens with so we get into there, and obviously Tiffany, who we say we haven't spoke about very much at the minute, but such an integral character in the film, and is really in a lot of ways the character that along with Kirsty, that there would be as positive a resolution as there is without her. You know, she although it is for most of the film not verbal, she, you know, adapts to the situation extraordinarily, considering, you know, what she's been through. We get hints of what you know, happened to her mum, and you know, why she has been left the way she is. We're told at the start that, you know, that she's there, you know, they don't really know much about her, and we find out later on that it's almost certainly Channard has you know, killed her mum and is now keeping her because he knows that he's going to need to open the configuration at some point, and she's you know, obviously all of that stuff is terrible, but there's something really sort of, it's one of the pathetic elements of him, that he wants to summon the Cenobites, but actually, you know, at least Frank could do it himself, you know, at least he had the sort of, you know, he's got all this knowledge and all this ability and all this, you know, scientific know-how and skilled hands as a surgeon, but won't open the box himself, you know, whereas, you know, not only can Tiffany solve it, but throughout, she's the second half of the film, she's looking for ways to help the situation, to get the box back, to solve it, to, you know, it's a really strong character, and a difficult, you know, job, not being able to, you know, speak throughout. And I think Imogen does a really good job playing her.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing to be such a pivotal character and yet have a handful of lines. Yeah, she's great. I think it must have been quite challenging, like, as a performer, to have to do so much, essentially face acting and body acting in order to kind of get points across. And her pairing with Kirsty is great. She seems to be, I mean, Kirsty is obviously like Supergirl at this point, like very resilient and has seen a lot at this point, and is still, thankfully, still affected by it. So she doesn't seem sort of jaded or anything, and like, oh, I've seen that. And she, you know, she's not going to smoke a cigar and be like, I remember, I've seen this before. And like, none of that. She's still very, very much affected by it. But yeah, Tiffany seems equally very capable, and it's nice to have female characters that are not sort of just kind of like floating about and go, oh no, what am I going to do? And we also have, you know, we have the villainous character of Julia. Like, I think all the female characters in it are very, very fun and very, certainly Kirsty as well, very thought out. I do think that, like, it would have been nice for Tiffany to have a little more agency. She does kind of get dragged about a little bit by Kirsty, but equally she seems very, very young. So, you know, there's a certain point at which, like, I don't think she should be expected to be at the forefront and kind of, you know, doing too much of the kind of pushing forward element of the story. But yeah, I do think it is interesting that that what you were saying about Channard, he doesn't physically open the box. He has so many people trying to do it for him, and he can't even achieve that. Even so, Julia even has to come into the mortal realm in order to help him as well, to an extent. Like, she's we're getting Tiffany opening the box in a room where they're sort of looking through this little porthole window that they've created to watch her do it and everything. I just think he's Channard is kind of, he's got this like cowardice to him. It's almost as if he doesn't want to physically open it. Like, I don't know how much he knows, because obviously he's researched this box a lot, but I don't think there are many people that come back. So there's no sort of real accounts of what it is actually like on the inside. So whether or not he even knows that, and like, I don't know whether he knows that him opening it kind of is almost contractual. Like, I don't know if it's actually an active thing of him going, oh no, I best not be the one who opens it because I know what that means. I think it is genuinely a case of, I don't know how to do this, which is, yeah, as you say, wild considering how intellectual he is as a character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and also because I guess in the novella there are, and it's a detail I really love in the novella about like the things to sort of get favor with the Cenobites, which is to give, you know, like most deities, whatever you know, be it a god, be it a spirit, be it a folk saint, whatever it might be, be it a saint in general, you give them offerings, don't you? And there's, You know, there's something about, you know, like I mentioned this in the last episode, but Frank has to, you know, he stores up his own piss for a while, you know, because that's a good present for them, a good offering for them. And I like stuff like that. And here, yeah, for all of his research, it just feels like in the end, he just has to rely on someone else to do it, despite his clearer sort of accomplishments, both in science doctoring and villainy. Really, he does a good job in all of them. So let's talk about the scene that I sort of brought up earlier, because I do think it's a scene that gets a lot of sort of conversation about. When you talk about this film, you end up talking about this moment, and I know it divides fans an awful lot. It's certainly, I have mixed feelings about it. And it is the scene where once Ch'Nad has become a Cenobite, you know, and he's got this sort of attachment that looks like the whizzy sort of, you know, device he uses during the brain surgery at the beginning attached to his head. So it's almost like he is organically attached to the labyrinth or Leviathan in some way, you know. Kirsty and Tiffany end up, you know, back with the Cenobites again, who are, again, in this film used expertly, which is that they're not used very much. You know, they're an extra part of the story, and it's the best way to use them. You know, that Pinhead says to Kirsty, you know, no more running, no more deals, you know, enough of that. You know, we've had, you know, a film and a half of this now. It's really time that we, you know, you're part of, you know, you come and, you know, let us experience your flesh. She reveals to, using, you know, the image of Elliot Spencer that Kyle finds in the Ch'Nad's files, that she shows Pinhead and says, you know, you were all human. And it does appear that this is something they weren't aware of, that, you know, that what they've been doing to themselves and to other people for, you know, this period of time has corrupted them so much, has divorced them so much from their humanity. They cease to remember they were people. And you know, and Pinhead's dismissive of that at first, isn't he? You know, he doesn't. I think he genuinely doesn't believe it. I don't think he's just doing it as a front. You know, he doesn't remember at first.
Yeah, I was wondering about whether or not that's like maybe if you've been a Cenobite for a long time, maybe your human memories deplete as the sort of, you know, the suffering and the pleasure that you're giving over to other people starts to take over, and maybe it's just so far back in his mind, but he does eventually recollect, doesn't he? Sort of looks at the photo and eventually comes around to remembering that's him. It'd be interesting to know. I guess there's sort of twofold to this. Like, first of all, I don't know what the era was. It looked like maybe it was like World War I that he was in, based on my sort of very, very small knowledge of military uniform, and how much and how time passes within the labyrinth. So it could be that time passes significantly slower, and so he's actually been in the labyrinth for hundreds of years potentially, or that time is exactly the same, but it doesn't actually require that much in order to lose your real life memories and for something else to come to the forefront. But I guess because he seems to remember sooner and the others don't, but well, equally they don't have a prompt, I suppose. They don't have a photo of their former self in front of them. But yeah, I mean, I didn't feel particularly like offended or torn by the concept that they were humans once, and I actually that's why I thought was quite cool about having Dr. Ch'Nad become one. But yeah, as I was saying earlier, I'm still curious as to sort of what the you know, what do I have to put on my CV to be a Cenobite at this point, because it doesn't seem super like consistent, especially with what Julia manages to go through. But I guess maybe Leviathan wanted to have a connecting someone to move between realms in order to help
to the box.
Yeah, and the quote that you said about her bringing souls. So I think that's also probably an element of that. So maybe he's always going to have someone who's doing that job.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then we have this Kirsty revealing to the Cenobites that they were once human. And then we have this moment where Channard enters, and this is the moment I'm talking about, really, in terms of like everyone sort of talks about the sort of whether they like this or not, is that he arrives and very quickly dispatches all of the Cenobites. You know, he kills them all very, very quickly. And I know for me, with how badass I think these characters are, you know, it's never, and you know, I think I've justified it more to myself over the years, which is, as I said to you earlier, they've just regained a certain amount of humanity while he's just lost his, so he's colder, more powerful maybe at that moment. And it's not so much the fact, I guess it is actually, it is the fact that he just kills them all, which I've never really liked. But it's how simply it happens. You know, it happens within the space of like a minute, you know, and there's no sort of real fight put up. He kills the three other Cenobites. Pinhead is left. He transforms Pinhead back into the man he once was. Elliot and Kirsty sort of share a sort of knowing look at each other. And then, you know, Elliot pulls one of his blades out to fight Channard and has his throat cut, and he dies as well. And it's always just felt, you know, as much as I love the film, underwhelming, really. You know, that these characters who are so fantastic and look so amazing just are sort of suddenly cast aside for this other character. And yeah, I don't know, how did that feel to you watching it? Because I know it is something that sort of for fans is the, maybe if they like this film, is the one sort of bugbear that they have with it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I see what you mean. And I don't think I necessarily registered it at the time. And I think probably because in my mind, I have no idea where we're going to go from here. And it'd be really interesting to see where we do go in terms of what Cenobites we get from now on. But yeah, what is it about the Doctor as a Cenobite that makes him stronger than these other ones, considering the implication, certainly from the first film, is that they are extremely powerful, and is the fact that maybe they've been reminded of their humanity, is that suddenly, oh, well, that's it, we can't have you anymore, because if you know that you're human, we can't have you, which is a massive shame, because the four of them together are such an incredible looking lineup as well, like what a horrifying thing to encounter. Not to say that the Doctor isn't, but like we've established this incredible like quad of Cenobites, and now we're just going to get rid of them. Yeah, it's a shame, considering certainly with Pinhead, such an iconic look, as well as the other ones, but I think him being the lead Cenobite, and like I think that's such a strong image that's associated with Hellraiser. And to be fair, I think I've seen some poster art for some of the other films, and I'm like, I think I saw like another pin-headed character maybe, but I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if it's Doug Bradley or someone else, but either way, I'm like, yeah, okay, great, we're not losing this concept, but it seems a shame to have set up something so incredibly powerful to just for something slightly more powerful to come along and just wipe them out. Now that I'm thinking about it, it is kind of, it's a bit of a bummer, and it would have been nice to just be like, no, if the Doctor wants to be the new lead, fine, but he should still have, you know, two on either side of these, like, you know, super powerful Cenobites who've potentially been around longer than him and can maybe, you know, assist in the suffering and the pleasure and the whatnot, you know.
Yeah, I wonder whether what we're really sort of looking at in this scene is an issue of like, how do we depict what would be, I imagine, a fairly epic fight between these four figures and Channard, you know, and how do we do that in a way that looks good? And I guess the reality is that after consideration, they thought, we can't really make it look as grand as it needs to. We want him to be the adversary at the end of the film, even though, to be honest, his dispatch is sort of odd and sort of, you know, just, you know, Channard just sort of, after this scene happens, we then have, you know, what looks like, because by this point Julia has been like swept down a corridor, removed from her skin, you know, her skin is left and she's swept away. to not be seen again. And this moment happens. We then build to the climax of the film, which is a standoff between Tiffany, Kirsty, and Shenard, and he dies because, and this is, by the way, the lead up to this is great. The things he's saying. I love all of the things that come out of his little appendages, like the eyeball, the finger, the flower, which I think is so cool, because I love it when you're putting something quite beautiful into something so hideous. They do it in the first film with a rose on the screen, don't they? And it's fantastic. So all of this imagery is great, but then it appears that Julia has had a change of heart, and she distracts Shenard while Tiffany starts to solve. The box had just morphed into like a mini Leviathan. She starts to navigate it back into the box. When Shenard notices, he sends two of these sort of blades from himself into the ground, and because they miss Tiffany, the Leviathan's sort of appendage tears his head off. And it's just, there are these two moments that sit right at the end of this really fantastic film that I just sort of think, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, we're in a sort of dreamlike, odd logic where anything, anything can happen. We're in, this version of, an alternate reality. But I don't know, it doesn't stand up under too much scrutiny, does it really? You're this super powerful being, but for goodness sake, don't ever miss, because that will be your undoing. Did that strike you as something?
Leviathan can't stand for terrible accuracy. He's like, no, that's a deal breaker for Leviathan. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, did that feel sort of I think when you're watching the film, because it's become so out there in terms of its imagery and whatnot, like this moment doesn't feel as sort of as it maybe should. You sort of accept it, but I think whenever I think about it, I go, that's not actually the most satisfying conclusion to that character or the Cenobites, is it? That they get dispatched quickly, and then the being that was so powerful it was capable of getting rid of them in a couple of, in a minute, that being itself can't fire off a couple of blades into some stone without being dispatched as well. Am I being harsh, or am I making,
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable. And also, I agree with you that it didn't necessarily register in the moment. And I think that was probably partly because everyone knows that the Doctor at this point is horrible and we want him gone. So, there being a very, seemingly innocuous reason for him to go, he missed. Well, sorry, that's it. That's a deal breaker. That one there, I think is it's almost celebrated because we want him gone because he's so horrible. So I think, and also maybe. I'm wondering how much. I know that sort of the we've got this big suction thing on him, which it feels like maybe Leviathan is Jaeger piloting him a little bit, but maybe not all the time. So maybe when Leviathan taps out to go do something else, and he comes back and the Doctor has absolutely fucked it by not managing to get his hooks in, he's like, "Oh, you're absolutely useless." Just I wonder whether or not Leviathan was even in charge of the taking out of the Cenobites. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he'd come back from his little break, that whatever he was doing, he came back and noticed all the things that the Doctor had done and just went, "Are you kidding me? You took out my 4 favorite Cenobites and you can't even hit these two girls. Absolutely useless. You're gone, mate. You're gone." And I don't know whether there was. Maybe he was planning on taking one of the others to replace him, or again, I don't know how he usually forms Cenobites. I feel like obviously the Doctor was a great choice because he's already messed up in the brain in terms of him being villainous. I'm curious as to what Leviathan's plan was after that. But I guess maybe we'll find out in number 3,
we'll find out.
Or maybe there wasn't a plan, maybe, because I also know that, from reading something, that Leviathan is also an agent of chaos. So maybe the idea of just taking out the 4 Cenobites is chaotic and outrageous and unnecessary to us, but, to him, to them, to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? Why not?
And
it's chaotic. Just do it.
And that's a nice thing about a figure like that, isn't it? Is that, if it is something beyond us, and also, as you say, if it's chaos, and the connotations of chaos being that, the primordial chaos and something that has existed before existence, this great whirling abyss of everything and nothing, that we can't know its plan really. And yeah, that's I think that's a good way of looking at it. But as I say, like, I think this film is really an incredible work. I just think that there are a couple of bits towards the end where it's trying to tie everything up within a decent runtime as well, that maybe it just feels like we need this thing to happen now, as opposed to it organically sort of happening within the plot. And the revelation, of course, here that it isn't Julia that has helped. It is Kirsty who had time to run and pick up Julia's skin and put it on and run back. And, I think, what has been very helpful in both the first and second film is how well other people's skin fits you. You wouldn't know, would you? But
so nicely, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Perfect.
It's not saggy like a morph suit. It's just always perfect.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it looks great. The Kirsty and Tiffany make it back, as everything starts to fall apart, as Chenard's head is torn from the rest of his body, or at least the top half of his head is torn from the rest of his body. They make it back to the real world. And then, as does happen, we then find out that maybe things aren't as nicely wrapped up as they might be, and we see back at the house that at Chenard's house now, when they're clearing everything out, the removal guy, who I do think is the fella from the first film, but I would really have to go and have a look. But I did spot it this time and go, I think that's the guy who, says, is there any beers? And they're in the fridge.
Yeah.
So I think it's him. And we then see the end of the film is this sort of post coming out of the, coming up with all of these, icons from the film to various degrees of effect. I do think, as you say, the special effects are really amazing in this film. Maybe not quite so much at this moment. There's a little skeleton guy on there laughing, which is just the stuff of wind up and let it go nightmares. But it finishes with the face of the character from the first film who we haven't seen, saying, "What's your pleasure, sir?" We cut to credits, and we are at the end of Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, the second film in this franchise. And when the credits rolled, Sarah, what were your thoughts? Were you satisfied?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like, I thought that the ramp up in the suffering and the violence was really good. Like, it's exactly where I wanted it to go in terms of that. I thought that the winding storyline, the labyrinthian way that it moved, like, was really good as well. I was really satisfied with the film, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would still say I think I prefer the first one, but there are some elements in the second one that I really, really, really liked. So it's a very close second for me at the moment. But such a nice, I feel like they're a perfect pairing for each other. They do just feel like it's one big giant story at this point, and such a great representation of the novella. I really like them.
Awesome. Yeah, I think they'd stand really well next to each other. I'm of the first film, if I had to pick as well. I just think that it maybe tells it, but it is tiny. The gap in which one, and maybe some days maybe the second one sometimes feels like the more attractive one to watch sometimes. Although I will say that I felt like watching the second one this time that I'd watched Hellraiser an awful lot in the last few years and hadn't really watched Hellbound. Right. So it was very nice to sit and watch Hellbound for the first time in a while, and all of the pleasures and pains that it has to offer. The film comes out the cinema. It does okay, I think. I think it does right. Critically, not so well. I don't think it was particularly revered, particularly compared to its predecessor. But I do think, looking at the sort of the extremity of some of the things in Hellbound and the way that sort of critics watched films like this at the time. I do think if this were, if this had, because I know when we went to the cinema to see Hellraiser, it had a was it 40th anniversary release or 30th anniversary release, it would have been at the time. 40th anniversary release, it would have been at 40, the time.
Yeah.
And obviously reviews were, modern reviews were glowing for it. And I do think if Hellbound was to see a re-release now, with the way that maybe critics are now being there was a period in the 80s, and I think a period in the early 2000s where they just couldn't say nice things about horror movies, and I think very unfairly so, and I think it would be treated much more fairly if it were re-released and reviewed nowadays. And yeah, I mean, it's iconic, isn't it? And from here on out, we leave the sort of the sort of more independent style, low budget looks of the Hellraiser films, and in a few years' time we head to the productions in the States, starting with Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. And then a very, the journey ahead is fraught with, up highs and lows, and interesting decision making, I think. But it's going to be quite the journey, I think, for sure. Am I allowed to give spoilers for Hellraiser stuff outside of the? Because I don't want to talk about the later films now, but am I allowed to give spoilers from stuff outside of the films? Is that okay?
I think that's fair. I'll allow that.
Cool. In terms of the sort of rules and regs of of the Order of the Gash, or indeed the wants of the Cenobites and stuff like that, there is a really cool comic series from Boom Comics that continue the story from Hellraisers 1 and 2 that involve Kirsty, involve Pinhead, and what they're actually re-releasing them soon and adding some new stories to it. I think at the end of the year there's a new 6-part series coming. But there is a sort of a trade-off that happens in those comics, a deal that is made between Kirsty and Pinhead that is really cool, and I would really recommend either. I think they kickstarted for it, but I think it's finished now. But if you can get hold of the Boom Comics to sort of maybe continue, an alternate trajectory that maybe stays with the themes and the ideas from the first two films, the Boom Comics are excellent and really, really worth looking at. And there we are with Hellbound Hellraiser 2. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been so much fun to chat about it.
Oh, it's been great. I'm really excited to take the roller coaster that is the rest of the franchise. Yeah, don't worry. There's still plenty of good stuff in there for us to look at. And with some of them, even some of the ones that maybe aren't wholly successful, they still, exist in that plane of some really interesting ideas, so we're going to have lots to talk about, and we hope everyone comes along with us and experience. If you haven't seen the sequels, watch them before the episodes come out and experience them along with us. So I think they're a little bit easier to get hold of in the UK now. When they first came out, particularly some of the sequels from 5 onwards, they just didn't receive UK releases. My copies of 5, 6, 7 and 8, I had to import DVDs from the US. They just didn't come out in the UK. They got terrible distribution. For reasons that we will talk about at length. The history of these films after a certain point is sort of tied up in some sort of, to be frank, shitty goings on. And it will be, we'll discuss those as we get there. Thank you all for joining us. Just before I shut up and let Sarah, sign us out. Just a reminder to everyone, I'm sure you all know this already, but Evil Dead Burn is out, not next week, the week after, July 10th.
And we're crazy about Evil Dead, so we will be heading to see it luckily a few days early before it releases. And if you follow us on socials, maybe we'll give a little hint as to our thoughts. But it's been 5 for 5 for me so far in that franchise. They're all amazing, and I'm really excited to see where they go. Yeah,
it's going to be awesome, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Evil Dead will burn on July 10th. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks with Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth. I'll hand over to Sarah now, who will give you all the important info, and thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure and never suffering to be recording these episodes. So I'm sure that if you're tuning in, you're probably listening to us and maybe watching us on YouTube. Remember, the name of the show is Into the Darkness. We are Uncanny Collective, and that's how you'll find us on YouTube. If you follow us on Instagram, we're Uncanny_collective. And also, I'm Sarah Lynham, Steve Fitzgerald, who's Uncanny Steve on Instagram. Our handles are at the bottom of our video. Follow us, like, comment, subscribe, share, repost. What else can you do?
Talk to us.
Follow. Wait, did I say follow it? Yeah, talk to us. Send us messages. We'd love to hear what you think of the episodes. We'd love to hear what you think of the Hellraiser franchise. If you've listened to other episodes, we'd love to hear what you think. Give us a suggestion. We had one of our listeners suggest Fright Night, which was an incredible watch for me. I really loved it, and Steve has loved it for a long time. If you can figure out something that I haven't seen, even better. But I'm always happy to rewatch something, and Steve and I can talk about it. You can also find our episodes on our website. I keep wanting to say underscore, but I mean Uncanny, uncannycollective.co.uk. It's been a pleasure, as I say, and we look forward to seeing you next time for the next installment of Into the Darkness. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.